One. Welcome to Chris Evans Radio. We are back with Dr. Danny, and the topic for today is why in the world would you ever want to do Dante rows? Now, I'm going to start off by saying this. I love the exercise. Yes, I get for most people, they look at it and they say, Chris, like just sit down and do a normal close grip pull down. Like logically, I hear you. On the other side of that coin, I always ask those individuals that challenge me with this exercise, how many freaks have you built and why are you still under 200 pounds? And they can't answer it. When if you go look at Dante Trudell's track record of building freaks, and anyone who's done DC training as a whole has grown arguably probably the best of their career or one of the best times. So, Danny, I'll let you start here. I'd really like for you to break down like the biomechanics of the Dante row, and then I know you and Dave are huge fans of that exercise. Like, what do you think the benefits are? Let's start there. Let's start out with the biomechanics, and then we'll talk about the benefits.
So I think like when we think about training a lat or any body part, the biggest mistake that people make is thinking that it operates on one plane of motion. It does not. Like the actual, we talked about this before, like the actual muscle fibers are three-dimensional. There is no just like sagittal plane. There's like internal and external rotation throughout, just like globally. There's a spiraling effect that happens. If you want to get into the muscle physiology of that, send me a DM and I'll nerd out. Um, but with the Dante row, we're really looking for lower lat, right? And
Yes.
so we're going to try to grow a muscle. We want to get it in its fully lengthened and fully shortened position. What do we need to do that? Well, we're probably going to need some degree of lumbar and lower thoracic flexion. What do most people do when they're in a like another pull down position? They lock everything down, right? So are you going to get full length on that muscle? No. Second, when we think about getting full length on a muscle, we want to, especially if you're a bigger guy, you want to think about degrees of freedom. If you're restricted in mobility, the more degrees of freedom you have, which basically is like how many ways can you move through the motion, um, the greater the likelihood that you're going to be able to find full length, full contraction. So in a traditional pull down, and we looked at this when you and I trained and get together in person, how many times are you like limited in your range of motion because you just have mass that takes up space and you literally run out of room?
Right.
Someone who's sub 200 pounds isn't going to understand what that feels like, and they've probably never even seen anyone big enough. Because once you see someone who's actually big, you get a better respect for like, oh, for them to actually lengthen that muscle, they need to change their position a little bit. So the Dante row does a lot of things. The biggest thing, in my opinion, is that it reshapes the rib cage in a way that not only allows the lat to fully expand, but when the rib cage reshapes and can get a little bit of that rounding in the back that we need, it allows for more scapular upward rotation, which is needed to again get full range of motion. So that's just a quick and dirty, but I'd love to hear if that's kind of what you feel.
Okay. You described everything flawlessly. And for like the people out here who don't understand all the complexities of what you just said, the ability to round my upper back and fully stretch my lats while allowing my erectors and spine to be fully lengthened. That's a sensation I can only get with a Dante row. Like all at the same time working in harmony. Something else that's huge that you said about creating space, this optimal group of guys who don't have a lot of muscle yet don't understand what you just said. They can't comprehend it because they 9 times out of
Right.
10 have never seen it. If they see guys that are 250 plus, they just look at them like from this high, like, oh, those are steroid users, I'm not gonna pay attention to them. Where when I was young, man, I wanted to watch how those big guys operated and lifted and moved through space. And I was like, man, like that they're doing that because they have to create it.
Yeah.
And so I appreciate that. Sadly, this group doesn't understand it, right? So everything you just said in terms of biomechanics and why I would choose this exercise, but let's see here. That's a whole other side topic that I don't know if I want to. You know what? I do. Yes. The Dante row for me is an addition to the rest of my back workout. It's not a standalone exercise I do just for back.
Yes. Yeah. Like you're not going to load that for like a heavy set of eight.
No, no.
That's not how you use that movement.
Absolutely not. 9 times out of 10, I'm going to do a rest pause with it, and I'm going to shoot for somewhere around 20 to 30 total reps. Okay.
Agreed.
And that's over the course of three mini sets. So however you look at the dichotomy of that, let's say I do 12 on the first, 8 on the second, 4 on the last. That's a total of 24 total reps. So that's how I'm looking at that. Or I might do like say a cluster set of 888. Or I'm for the most part never going to think about top set back off on that. I might do a volume approach, go 15, 12, 10, where I'm pyramiding down in terms of weight, and heavier weight while the reps come down. But for the most part, it's usually going to be a rest pause. And then I'm going to sit in that stretch at the end for 20 seconds before moving on to training my lower back.
Yep.
I think a lot of times when I post like a standalone Instagram video, for some reason these kids or people negatively responding, they're like, "Oh, that's all he did for back that day. He thinks this is the greatest exercise." And sadly, when you look at my back day, if you just made it a black hole vacuum, they don't see the six or five things I did beforehand and why it
Right.
led to that being the right exercise in that time of the workout. And I think sadly that exercise sequencing gets overlooked and they think, oh, Chris, like just do a close grip pull down. And I said to one of the guys, I said, here's a fun fact, and it's going to blow your mind. I did that second in rotation.
Well, I think there's a giant like where's the gap? And I think the biggest bottleneck is still quite frankly people being married to a rep range. To where like if you were only going to train in sets of like 6 or 8, I saw someone talking about doing a sets of 4 for their biceps, which is a whole other like
Like, yes.
talk about that time. But if the bottleneck is you believing that a certain rep range is the only way that you're going to grow, well, then yeah, Dante Rowe might not be the best fit for you because there's a lot of external stability demand. There's a lot of internal pressure management demand. And the more of those things happen, well, then it's probably going to be easier to lose the shape of the rib cage. If you lose the shape of the rib cage, then you're losing all the other things. So you have to kind of match the implement to what you're trying to do. And I don't know about you, my favorite part of the Dante Rowe is that nasty stretch that you
Correct.
get, especially on the rest pause. I mean, it is brutal. And if you've not connected with your lower lats before, feeling out that stretch and then going into a like super shortened contraction, it's yeah, it's a different kind of money.
There's a lot of reasons that I love it. The stretch is definitely one. Something else that I like for as a teaching tool is with having that the flat part of the seat that you would normally sit on for seated cable rows. I can have one of my clients say, all right, I need to take your elbows and forearms and hands and glide it along that bench. You and I
Hmm.
both know what that does. That's a tricky way of having you to make sure your traps are depressed, right? Like I'm making my arms have to come here and then I need to take my elbows to my ribs. That's all I'm trying to trick you into doing. And then when you learn that
Yeah,
sensation, now we can carry it over to all the hard shit we did beforehand on the next time you train back. Like
right.
it it's an exercise, and I think that a lot of times, like on as a standalone, if you ask me, like Chris, what's your favorite back exercise? That's not going to be the first one. Like
Right.
realize that's not going to put pounds of muscle on my lat, but what it's going to allow me to do is connect to that, and it's that skill is transferable when I do all the heavy shit before, and it's all a tool in the toolbox.
$100.
This is a scalpel exercise. I'm not trying to say it's not a dumbbell row, it's not a deadlift, it's not an RDL, right? It's not a barbell row, it's not a T-bar row. I fully understand that. And I think again, if if I'm looking at my workout as a whole, it all makes sense. Like
Hmm.
if you're looking at it in a vacuum and saying the Dante row for lats, like I think a lot of people need to install it. But if that's all you're doing, then that's not going to be the best option. But I don't train in that. I don't do full body days. I don't do upper body days. So when I train back, I'm doing probably 4 to 6, maybe 7 exercises over the course of the whole session. And if that's not your training style, then maybe this isn't the right answer for you. Um,
Yeah.
to go back to something you were touching on about the 4 to 6 rep range, if I'm going to think about back training, right? I want to logically put this out here for people. Most gyms that I would say the vast majority of people work out in, the heaviest dumbbells your gym's probably going to have is 120-pound dumbbells. Okay. So let's say dumbbell rows is an exercise you want to do. You're eventually going to get to the end of and you can no longer lift in the 4 to 6 rep range because you're going to become too strong at it. Like, so if you think about that, okay, awesome. How heavy are the stacks on most gyms cable pull downs? Probably 200. again, you're going to reach the bottom end of that unless you order a gym pin. You're not going to be able to put any more weight on it. Okay, so let's just keep working down the dichotomy of that shit, right? Most machines, like that Cybex row at Elite, for example, it's a 200-pound stack. I could pull that for fucking 25 if you had a gun to my head. So I begin to think about these exercises. Okay, cool. So Chris, just pick up a bar. Awesome. All right. If I was to put enough load on a barbell row for me to hit the 4 to 6 rep range, how much of a rector is stealing that? How much hamstring and glute
Right.
is stealing that load in terms of stabilization of the pelvis? Like, I just need people to think about this shit. Like, if you ram a T-bar in a corner and pull it old school Ronnie style, how many plates am I going to have to stack on that bar to get 4 to 6 reps?
You're going to find a way to move the weight.
Yep.
Like most people will, right?
Yep.
And that's like these are the people that quite frankly don't have the development. Like I think I was telling you that I've got someone right now who he's really, really smart. He's been probably one of my favorite people to consult with, just super, super open. But he trained for years with Dusty.
Oh, right. Yeah.
And so he knows how to like he's gonna find a way to add the rep, right? Like he can run himself into a wall and my role with him is basically to install a bungee cord on him so that he can run off that wall if he wants to, pull him back and then help him scale it. And a lot of what we talked about is it's just varying rep range a little bit and why. And so if we think about this and kind of bring it back to the Dante row, there are different types of training adaptations that you're going to want. And a lot of times we think strictly hypertrophy without thinking about all the other things like the scaffolding that needs to go in for that. I think the Dante row is a great way to kind of build in some of that scaffolding. Um, so while some of those heavier movements I think are great for like the meat and potatoes, like don't get me wrong, like again, I'm biased towards heavy training. Like give me a heavy deadlift, give me a heavy T-bar row. That's always going to be my preference, always. It's not productive for me anymore, but I love it. But when we think about all the other things that need to happen for develop, not only for development, let's say, okay, you want to improve your bench over barbell row, right? What else needs to happen with that? Well, you probably need to make sure all the tendons and your shoulders can kind of hang, right? You probably need to make sure that as you learn to stabilize load, your core stays kind of up to pace. You probably want to make sure that you're maintaining scapular mobility so that you're actually getting a reach at the bottom and not just getting like a terrible looking curl. You want to make sure that all of your connective tissue can actually lengthen. So there are all these other things that kind of need to be brought into play to support being able to do some of these more old school movements, for lack of a better word. And I think that what the Dante Road does so beautifully is it brings in a lot of those subsystems and kind of brings them up all together. Like you can't get in a position for that row and really think about scraping your elbows on the ground without maintaining good core like control and pressure management.
Right.
You can't do that movement without feeling a whole stretch where you can access it, which is going to allow all the other connective tissue to come up to its strength. People forget that our training and the lines that we access in our training are going to have an enormous influence on how well we move with everything else. And my husband Dave is a great example of this. He has that like super rigid look, and we're trying to bring out the bubbly in him because he trained so heavy for so long that all the soft tissue basically just densified. And so he moves like this rather than being able to expand like this.
Right.
And you see it in his dumbbell row. Like I called him out in his Edmonds row a couple weeks ago when I was like, you're not getting anything out of the last third of that eccentric, and that eccentric is what we need to freaking milk. Um, so I think when we're putting together a training structure, a training program, it's not just about the rep range. And people get so married to that rep range. And I think we need to be a little bit more clear on what adaptation are we looking for. Because what you mentioned about like the sensory motor control, being able to actually connect with your back, is there utility in that? Absolutely. Are you going to add, slabs and slabs of muscle from a Dante row? No, but there are a lot of secondary and even tertiary benefits from that movement that are going to make everything else better. Are your shoulders going to be healthier for it?
I think so.
Yeah.
So I always bang on this, especially for young and intermediate, and then anybody advanced that's having a hard time bringing up a weakness. I like higher reps because once you learn how to connect to it, it just reinforces that, right? Like I, I know that my sports background may skew this judgment, but anytime we've ever had to get proficient at a play, at a route, at anything, what do? We beat that into the ground until it's you don't think about it. It's just oh awesome. Like I'm ready to run a slant. It's three, it's right foot, left foot, bam in the ground, get across the field, catch a ball, score. Like how many times do you have to do that before it's perfect to where you transfer one to a game and you can score? A
Mhm.
thousand. 10,000, 100,000. Okay, cool. Well, if you're doing 4 to 6 reps and you're doing, say, 2 sets, okay, so you're getting 8 to top end 12 reps total. Okay. What if I had you do 3 sets of 12 and I'm getting 36 as opposed to 12? Next thing you know, you're beginning to say, oh man, like, okay, that Dante row taught me how to train my back. Now I can take that and apply it with like that feeling and sensation needs to be in every lat exercise. Now I'm getting growth. Like,
That compound interest effect is huge.
and that's what a study can't teach you. Like that is something that is not talked about because it's not factored in. Like
Right.
uh, I could use shit. We just talked about this with my legs, right? Like I can train legs every 10 days and they can grow. Why? Because I connect to them well. I don't need to think about it. I do hack squats, I do leg press, and honestly, I probably wouldn't need anything else for my quads, and they'll still be one of my best body parts. Okay, my back is a different story. Like that needs more attention to detail because I have to actively think about training it. When my shoulders were dog shit, that's all I did. I said, okay, cool. I'm going to get so good at side lateral and bent over laterals that I'm going to figure out how to grow them. And then next thing you know, now they're a strength. Why? Because I did repetition at it.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
That's one of the reasons why I think John was able to bring my shoulders up so damn much is because he took my rep range from 8 to 12 and took it to 15 to 30. I'm doubling, if not tripling in some cases, the reps I'm doing per training session. Okay. When my form was locked in, now I triple the reps. I'm getting, if you're thinking about frequency, I'm essentially with the training shoulders once a week, I was getting 3 times the frequency.
Yeah. I wonder too, like, I wonder how much the perception of needing to like just find the one, the one right program or the one right cue or the one right, like we're narrowing the way for a lot of people, right? And I wonder how much of that is based on the perception that we only have this short, fleeting amount of time that we're able to train this way. Because if we remove the time component and we remove the perceived scarcity that doesn't have to be there, well, then if someone says, "Hey, Danny, you've got 20 years to keep doing this,"
Yeah.
I'm kind of like, "Oh, okay, I can take 8 weeks, 10 weeks, and really get good at nailing my root outs."
Right. Yeah.
And I think that's where that for you and I, that's probably where our passion for teaching people to think and being like, guys, like you can continue to progress past a certain age. I think that's probably where a lot of things come from is once you remove that scarcity, people become a lot more open to doing something different.
Can I share with you why I think that is developed?
Please.
Okay. I think it's one of two things. It's a race to a pro card because I think that's where money lies, or it's literally, or it's a money grab. And
Yeah,
all things lead to money, right? Um,
fortunately.
I'll share a fun fact with you. Like I trained the police chief of Roanoke, who used to be the police chief of Virginia Beach for a long time. And he told me, he's like, Chris, like if we go out for violent calls, it's either women, money, or drugs. Always.
I believe it. I believe it.
Always like I took that to bodybuilding, right? Like anyway, that's
True
a
though.
funny side rant, yeah, yeah. But if you I really believe that's what it is, right? Because it's like, oh, I joked, Dave and I were talking about this. He's like, if you're not pro by 25 now, you suck, right? Like
Yeah,
if I don't have 100,000 followers by 22, I'm horrible. I should stop teaching on the internet, right? Like, and I think that's why everyone is in such a rush. Like, oh my God, it's going to pass by me if I everything has to be perfect because I need to grow as fast as possible. I need to do this. I need to get this many clients. And like, I guess when I started, I didn't feel this need to rush anything. I was like, let's just
hmm,
let's just have fun and what happens happens.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
It always kind of goes back to that like I can worry or I can have faith. And I will always choose to have faith because I think it's more productive. Like
For
that's
sure.
how I approach this situation, right? Because it's such a like a grab for clout. Like, oh my God, like I have to be like this person, and I'm like, oh wow, like and listen, yeah, I think know me a lot of times. Like I really thrive in the fact of being really authentic and like being
Yeah.
true to myself. And even though I think a lot of times people will say, "Oh, Chris, like you remind me a lot of John," and I'm like, "Well, yes, him and I have a lot of similar characteristics. That's why we got along so damn well." But at the end of the day, like I'm still me.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
You know, so
Well, I think that, again, I think part of why you and I are so passionate about a lot of this is it's belief system driven, right? And for a lot of people, as the perception of success, the age of that decreases. Like people are getting more successful. First it was 30, and then it was 25, and it was 22, and it was 21. And now it's like if you don't have $1 million net worth at 20, there's something wrong with you. It's like, geez Louise. Um, but I think that the more that skews, the more people start to believe it's too late for them. And when people start to believe it's too late, that's when they start to make choices out of almost feeling cornered, out of fear, out of unbelief, out of, and at the end of the day, just being able to kind of get off of that like continuum for a moment and being, hang on, is this even what I really want? This is something like I've really struggled with in my business lately. Is like I look at other, bodybuilding coaches or PTs, and I keep trying to build a business that looks like them, and I'm like, that's not what I want. That's not who I am, right? Um, and I think it's a very genuine problem that a lot of people have is that our lives, we are so individual and so unique. And as soon as we allow the dialogue of social media or the dialogue of the world to superimpose a target on us,
yeah.
that changes our belief system. We got to get out of that because that's the quickest way to that's the quickest way to dampen our own gifts. It's the quickest way to dampen our authenticity. And again, I think that's part of why you and I are so passionate about deconstructing training because how we approach training and our physicality plays such a big role in how we engage with the rest of the world.
Yeah, one of my really like authentic fears or genuine fears in this life is that someone meets me and they're like, that's not who he is on the internet.
Hmm.
Or
Hmm.
or another one, like I know this won't last very long, but like I always hate the idea of like if someone sees me like, man, he looks way bigger on Instagram than he does in real life.
What a meathead thing to say. He's bigger on the ground than real life.
And I want to be the opposite, right? Which is why I don't filter any of my shit. Like, like
Yeah, yeah,
I
yeah,
am what
yeah.
I am. But yeah, like that to me is always terrifying. Like I don't want to play a role or be an actor of any sort. Like you're gonna get 100% of me. Now you listen, you may catch me on a weird fucking day, and you may, oh, he's a little different than I expected. But like as a whole, I, I, I've just always thought like there is nothing to be ashamed of when you're yourself, right?
For
Uh,
sure.
and
One of
I'm
my favorite things about you is that even when there are things that I can see you kind of holding back a little bit, I can see you're holding it back. There's no deception there. You know what I mean? Like you can tell you're very authentic.
yeah, and yeah, that I think that's just the nature of who I am, right? It's always like I used to have zero filter, and Angel would be like, "You're mildly autistic." Um, It's like your concept for like feelings and like your words on an impact on other people like is very similar to being on the spectrum. And I'm like, and she's like, you're not really autistic, but she's like, a lot of times like you when I speak to someone, it's out of just wanting to either help them or just like it's obvious to me. I'm like, well, of
Mhm.
course you're fat. You eat a Snickers bar at lunch every day. Like it's a it's a
Yeah, yeah,
it's a cause and effect, right? Like, it's not your genetics, it's not your insulin sensitivity. Like, you probably shouldn't have a regular soda 3 times a day. Like, let's get rid of that. And it's like,
yeah.
oh, well, that hurts my feelings. Why? You said you want to lose fat. I'm just giving you the answers.
Just
Like,
tell you the truth. You're true. I don't know if you look at the Enneagram at all, personality, you
no,
are like an eight in the truest sense, and it's so refreshing because you hide none of it. Just
right.
like very, of course this is how it is. Very honest, um, yeah.
I've always thought this, right? Like, so if you send me your photos and I always have bullshitted you. If I said to you, Danny, like that backlat spread really looks good, would you be able to like legitimate believe me? Like this fucker's lied to me for 6 weeks and said I look great when I know I don't. Or on the flip side, if I'm like, hey, like we gotta lose fat here, we gotta fix this. Like when you train, I need you to fix this. I need you to look at that. Like I need you to get your stomach in. Like, and then when it comes to you send me your photos and I'm like, hey, that shot is there. Fuck yeah. You can believe it because I've been honest with
Absolutely.
you the entire time, right? Like, which is why I don't give away fake praise. Like, and I think a lot of coaches cheerlead, and I always thought that was like not genuine at all. I'm like, Don't tell them they're great until they are. Or,
Yeah.
you know, listen, I said this to a guy once and I really fucked him up. But he said, "You never share my training videos or my progress photos. Why?" And I said, "I'm waiting for you to do something great." And it's the truth. Like, I worked with Shelby for 3 years before he shared any photo of mine. I didn't I didn't even question it because I knew I wasn't worthy of him sharing on his page compared to his other pros.
Hmm.
I know that might sound harsh to some, but that's how I was raised. You know?
It's interesting. So when you and I were working together for Chicago, I had a hard time with everything that you just mentioned, like actually believing the good and that you weren't just like blowing smoke because not because I didn't trust you, but because I am so critical of myself. And I think a lot of people are the same way, especially like the people that you and I work with, where it's like we talked about this before we got on air. Most of the guys that we work with say my back sucks, my arm sucks. The narrative is this sucks. I got to get better, which is true. But a lot of times I think that prohibits us from truly hearing a coach. So when you come in and say, yeah, that does suck, but then 3 months later you're like, hey, that's a lot better. There's a little bit more power in that.
Yes. And that's something that I've had to personally reframe my verbiage around my own physique
Hmm.
in the last 2 years is instead of saying like my back is a weakness, it's yes, it needs to grow, but it's not as bad as it once was.
Hmm.
Like my
Yeah.
arms are still smaller than I want, but they're not as small as they were. And that simple just flip of the mind goes a long way for not only just like mental health and stability, but it it reinforces a belief in yourself of, hey, I'm doing the work.
Yeah.
It's progressing. It's just not at the same rate as the rest of my physique. Like I had a really good Chris Schaub and I were talking. He's like, how's everything look, man? And I was like, it's going really, really well. He's like, how much is your back brought up? And I said, it's definitely better, but it doesn't match the rest of my body yet. And he's like, yeah, because the rest of your body's fucking blown out. I'm like, yeah, exactly. Like
Yeah.
that's just right now, that's my current reality. But every day I wake up in an effort to fix it. So I think a lot of times what you just touched on, that mentality switch can go a long way for people in their progress. So
For
when your
sure.
coach does say, for example, like, oh, like your thigh gap's not as big as it once was, that's a compliment. Like I feel like I say that to some of my guys. I'm always like, oh, like you still have a thigh gap, but it's not as bad as it was. Like it's like I don't know if I've ever shared this with you. Like I fucking hate thigh gap. Like it's like a personal vendetta. Like I don't want any of my clients to have it.
Well, there's something so just like unpowerful about it.
Yes.
And
Yes.
I think that's like you see that on stage and you're just like you might have an awesome upper body, but as soon as you see that gap, it's like the deflating balloon just kind of comes out.
Correct. And I know part of it's also like poor posing for a lot of guys and them not
Yeah.
being like aware of how to make their adductors gain width. Or I say gain width, but you know what I mean? Like that hand
There's a
motion
different look.
of folding your adductors in. Like people
Yeah.
don't know how to do that. And that's because they don't get in the mirror and fuck around enough, in my opinion. Like that's how I learned how to make my adductors pop out.
Hmm.
And I think a lot of it too is the obsession with quad sweep. Like when guys say, I want to make my legs bigger, they automatically think quad sweep, quad sweep. Well, you and I both know that if you increase your quad sweep, of course it's gonna make your legs look bigger, but you want to add the most width to your legs, increase that adductor. Like make that, and like, it's not only adductor, but it's also some hamstring in there
I
too.
was just thinking, like, one of the things that I've had people do for that is just a couple of modifications to their lying hamstring curl. Because that's a big, so I trained seated for a long time because
Yes.
lying for me, I just had a hard time connecting, and I've kind of gone back to lying lately
Mhm.
um, with some additional setup tweaks. And I'm like, man, like my adductors feel freaking fried from this. It's like adductor, medial hamstring, kind of all of it.
Yes. Yeah. The next time you do lying leg curls, those ab
Day
pads?
today.
Oh, okay, perfect. Those ab pads that people lay on? It's like it's heightened on one side, it slopes down.
Yeah,
Put that on the leg curl, like where your quads are, to raise your,
yeah, that's what I do.
and then with your feet, put your heels all the way together and turn your toes out.
You're gonna laugh. Part of
Okay.
what I do is use that pad and I put something small between my knees that I need to maintain pressure on.
All right, perfect.
So
That's incredible. That's great. That's great.
love
I
it.
love when I share things with people and they're like, I already do that. I'm like, okay, good. You're in a good spot. Hell yeah.
Well, again, I think that's a great example of like I could peel through the biomechanics of the like, the posterior pelvic outlet and why that's important, and how we modify that in a leg curl. But again, great example of like we came to the same conclusion, the exact same conclusion.
You know how I came to it? I just fucking tried it.
Literally fuck around and find out.
I was like, I think I can get a little bit more range of motion out of this leg curl if I put an ab pad under my quads. Okay, cool. Tried that. Okay. And then what if I always was big on like fucking around with feet positioning. So it's like, shoulder width, a little bit outside, toes in, toes out, toes neutral. And I remember the first time I jammed my heels together, created that internal pressure of adductor turn on, and then just drove my heels towards my glutes aggressively as possible. I'm like, that feels different. And then you wake up the next day and you're like,
Yeah,
it's confirmed with some like a different type of soreness or when I say tightness, I'm not talking about like a negative tightness, but like you're aware you trained that muscle.
right. That like post training, like I don't want to call it a pump, but like kind of, yeah, you have that residual.
Yes. Yeah. And it
Yeah,
stays with you for 24-ish, for 36 hours, something like that. Like, so you're like, oh, my pants are definitely tighter today there. So it's like,
yeah, yeah,
I
yeah,
I think at the end of the day, like this goes really well with what we talked about with Dante Rose, because in my mind, I only came to that conclusion not from an intelligence standpoint, because I didn't really, I don't think about lifting that way, if I'm being honest, until it's retrospect, if that makes sense. Because when I'm in the
yeah,
mode, when I'm in there, it's very like art based, where it's just like feel and just instinct. And I realize that not everyone may have that instinct. I realize that I was probably gifted that at a young age and just having like a curious mind. Um, and again, this goes back to something else we talked about with feeling like things are time sensitive. Like I was never scared to try things because I'm like, I'm going to be doing this for the rest of my life. Like in my
yeah,
mind, like, I'm going to be lifting weights the rest of my life. Like, what is there a rush? Like, let's experiment.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah. When you lift, are you that way? Like what is your I know how intelligent you are.
God, I'm a bro when I train. Are you kidding? Am I sitting there going, like, I mean, maybe a little bit, but it's usually like, oh, hey, here's this thing. Here's what it feels like. Oh, let's try this.
Yeah.
And I think that like that's where, kind of where I wanted to go was we talked about like bringing it back to the Dante row. Like we think so much about a classification of a movement. Like we think about like a dumbbell row, and we think about a cable row, a pull down, a Dante row. But really, like what those are just different iterations of putting yourself in a position so that you can again create space and then contract that muscle in the way you want to contract it. And we get way too married to these classifications. And so I think the way that you and I approach training is less like movement classification based. Like, yeah, we're going to look at specific patterns, like you're going to have a squat pattern, a lunge pattern, which are kind of similar, a hinge, things like that. But at the end of the day, it's all about being able to have that kind of creative inquisitiveness about where am I feeling this muscle, where am I not, how can I make that happen?
Yeah. You know what's really interesting is I think most people look at back in like five sectors. They think about hip hinge, vertical pull, horizontal pull, right? And then
Mhm.
in these last two, not the hip hinge, within these last two of the vertical row versus horizontal pull, they think mass builder or isolation, right? Like I think that's how most people generally think about back.
Before we take that any further, do you agree with that or disagree with that? Like at face value, we're kind of like, okay, that's a good starting point, or are you like, it's way
Yes.
too.
I think that's the way I thought about it for a long time. And I think that's a great way to build a foundation of like understanding of exercise and exercise sequencing. Like I
Mhm.
really do. I'm not shitting on that whatsoever. Now, what I feel like, and I saw this really cool video. I wish I'd have sent it to you. It's Justin Bieber like leading an orchestra, and he's not doing it traditionally at all. He just like looks at a section of the orchestra. He's like, all right, violins, I need you to do this. And he like hits a tune and then does it with his hand, with his mouth, his literal. And then the people playing violin do it. And then he adds in trumpets, then drums. It's really fucking cool. That's how I think about training now. It's very orchestra driven.
Love that.
We need everything to work for one common goal, and that's to blow out that body part.
Huge.
Right. And it doesn't matter. It doesn't, I just chose back because we were talking about Dante row, but it can be freaking anything, right? Like
Yeah.
in my chest, like, okay, cool. Like I need something to hammer that upper chest, and then I need something for the really driving thickness out and projecting off my rib cage. Now I need to stretch it all out. Now I need to pump, and then now let's like sprinkle in some pec minor. Like if I'm looking at that, like I think about it as an orchestra, it all works together in unison. It's not one standalone thing. It isn't like just because I love slight incline dumbbell press, that is the shit and everything else is irrelevant. It's like, okay, cool. Like maybe that's the star, but that's not the whole performance. Like,
Yeah. You are hitting on some, like the way that you talk about that is so much the way that like if I'm doing program design for someone, especially if they've got like injuries and things like that, but they still want to train hard, it's like, okay, we need this whole thing to work in tandem. Like, yeah, it's that's a great way of describing it. I love that.
it's
That's
like,
part of why I think it takes you and I so long to put together like to put together a new client program for me, if someone has any sort of injury background or anything, like God, I'm looking at like 3.5 hours, sometimes 4. Once I peel through their initial round of like range of motion testing and stuff like that, like it takes time.
agreed. I, a lot of times, so if we'll have someone sign up online who wasn't a referral, who just came to us through either like word of mouth or he found Mountain Dog or maybe saw an Instagram post and like they submit their questionnaire, they submit their pictures, and like within 12 hours they'll like email and be like, well, I don't have my program yet.
Yeah.
And I'm like, I love that you're so fired up and want to get started, but I need you to know that this is 100% customized. Like, I need you to realize that if I could get you a plan turned around that fast, I didn't give you or it the due diligence that it deserves. Like,
I think that's a major thing that you do differently than a lot of other coaches. Because I only operate on the training side for now,
mhm,
I get a lot of guys who are working with another prep coach who just gives them a spreadsheet. Um, And I think that's something that, again, you and I, because we love training so much, we're like, bro, like, you mean to tell me that you're gonna, like, you want to turn pro and you're gonna be content to literally take some spreadsheet that's been distributed a couple hundred times. It's not even customized to you. They're gonna say it's customized, but like, come on, let's be honest. Like, these are some of the biggest prep coaches out there, and then they wonder why their clients are like, or the client wonders why they're beat up, why they're not progressing. It's just it's mind blowing to me.
it's
But I
actually
understand that diet is probably the bigger part of things when getting contest ready.
maybe
Most will say that.
most will say that. I don't agree with it, but yeah.
I'm with you. I don't agree with that. That's why you and I get
It,
Um,
it's synergistic. It's like I just talked about that orchestra, right? Like
yes.
everything plays a fucking role. And so many, like, I remember when Boston Lloyd was really popular when he was alive, and he was like, training is irrelevant, diet's irrelevant, it's all drugs. And I'm like, man, if it was that fucking easy, like, load up 3 cc's and let's fucking roll, homie. Turn me pro,
Get on
please.
stage. Yeah.
Like, it's not that simple. And I think a lot of people just boil it down to like, okay, cool, cool, Chris, like get all the fat off and you'll win. Well, no, not the truth. Um, what if I can use training to accentuate my physique as opposed to just being an afterthought? Like, I have had, if I get good guys and girls that come to me, give me a good all season into a contest prep, I can grow them into the show with 6 weeks to go.
You did that for me.
Weird, right?
That was while I was seizing.
And no one believes, listen, I get it. Like I say that, I don't market it because I'm sure people would just say it's bullshit. It's not true. You can't do that. I'm telling you, anyone that works with me mirrors that sentiment. And they're like, how am I still growing? How am I still progressing in the gym? And I'm like, because it all works together beautifully. Like there's a reason you still have a lot of food around your training window. The rest of your day, you might be starving. I get it. It sucks. But that training window, you are an absolute machine. I might put supplements in there. I might have things that aid in that.
Yeah.
And I'll also have it set up to where you don't train 47 days in a row and then you wonder why your performance sucks. Like,
Right. Yeah,
uh,
yeah, yeah. Well, I think this kind of comes back to what we started the original conversation with regards to, well, why not just do this? And overly, like the overly reductionist thinking about this whole process.
yeah,
I want to kind of bring it back to the Dante row, if that's okay.
Please, yeah, do it.
Mostly because I would love to hear your cues for that because I think a lot of people really struggle to feel lats there and they end up getting bicep and like even a little bit of front delt and teres.
Yes. Yeah. All right. So I do want to say one thing before I do that. With that reductionist mindset, I wish that my back grew from this. Pull-ups, barbell rows, dumbbell rows, deadlifts. And
That'd be great. That'd be such
every,
a fun session.
every Monday I go in there and I do a top set and a back off, and I walk away and my back is bigger. Please God, like give me
That'd be
that simplicity.
convenient.
Yeah.
That'd be so convenient.
And then every day I go in there, I either get more reps or more weight. Like, and then I don't have any spinal issues. I can connect with
Yeah.
my lats perfectly every fucking
Yeah.
time. Please God. Like, I
Great.
would,
Would like honestly, how awesome would that be?
yes, I would love to write that training program and charge $100 a fucking program PDF for it. Big backs with Chris, and I just did that for shit. Oh my God, stop it. I literally wish it was that simple for most people. Sadly, and I believe this in my heart, most people struggle. If I look at the bodybuilding world as a whole, unless you're an outlier, lats tend to be an area that most guys and girls struggle with. Not only connecting to them, posing them, but training them.
Mhm.
And listen, that's a whole other podcast for you and I to discuss why that is. But the reason that I love the Dante row is for the reasons I'm about to describe of the question you asked me, is it forces my lats to work if I do the form right. And what I want to think about is once you have a stable base of your knees braced on that bench, I'm able to allow everything in my brain to cut off. And I'm thinking about gain length and then fully short. And the only other thing I'm thinking about as I talk to you was driving it goes from like pinky to wrist to forearm against that pad and then driving my elbow into my pocket. Like that's as simple as as literally as when I'm doing it, that's what I'm thinking. Like if I don't want to get rear delt, then I don't allow my elbow to try like track behind my rib cage, right?
Yep.
That just means I'm over pulling. I need to be thinking about down, not back and behind.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
If I'm getting my biceps in it, the first thing I'm going to say is, okay, what are you using to grip, right? Like, are you using 2D handles? If so, strap into that thing and get up more of a loose grip. Because if I
Hmm.
bear down, like literally just watch this on camera. If I do that, if I bear down with my hand, my bicep goes straight up.
Hand pressure. Yep.
Guess what happens? A cool thing, like I don't know, like if you think about like I know a lot of people call it pistol grip, right? So you put most of the weight in your
Yeah.
last three digits of your fingers, like another great option.
Literally.
Are these what you're saying?
Throw in the brain. You have no idea.
Okay, good.
Like, so much.
Right. And then what I want to think about is something I always talk to my guys about if they're like, man, my biceps really work. I was like, hey, cool. Like, what's the function of bicep? I'm like, it's wrist to delt, right? Like that makes your bicep work. Okay. Now, if you are feeling that, I need you to keep your wrist away from your shoulder. It's as simple as that. Okay, well, Chris, how
Yeah.
do I do that? Elbow down, not flexion. Like, yeah.
Yeah.
I
I give people the cue a lot to like scrape their elbows on the ground, but one thing that I'll kind of toy out with people is some people need different degrees of like rib cage flexion.
right.
So like sometimes if people try way too hard to go into too much flexion, the only space they have left to move is through like elbow flexion.
Oh, right.
For
Yes.
me, if I'm too bent forward, that's
Huh?
that. So I think, just encouraging people to really like find their sweet spot of where they actually need to keep their trunk,
Yes.
is a big one that is going to allow them to keep their elbows low.
Yeah. So that's the only other thing that I didn't talk about was like I try to just be really limber is not the right word, but I'm trying to create a turtle shell type feeling in my upper back. And to me, that's just kind of relaxing. Like I'm not thinking about like I think a lot of times people get on that and they fuck it up because they try to arch. And I'm like, no, we want the opposite of an arch. I need you to be rounded through the upper spine. And that's that in that way, it's like it creates a sensation of like almost if I punched you in like the upper abs, like that. Like it's how I would probably
There's a lot of layers to that
okay.
my brain is doing things. I don't, yeah.
It's very similar sensation I like to feel of like, you know how the starting position on like a rounded back hyper would be for your glute.
Mhm.
That's how I think about it.
Well, I think that I want to bring this back to the two different types because again, like you and I are like the extremes of this, right? We're like you're kind of that wider type and I'm more the narrow type. And I talked about this a little bit in the mentorship group I run last night when we're these two different types. When we're given the turtle shell cue, we're gonna have different ways of getting there well and different ways of like kind of cheating to get there.
Okay.
One major way that and someone who's a little bit narrower, and I've got a lot of guys that have that structure, will cheat is by overusing their crunch muscle, overusing their rectus to kind of pull their rib cage down. And at that point, when you do that, what happens is from the side,
Mhm.
instead of getting like a nice smooth rounding,
Mhm.
what happens is this happens.
Right.
And you'll see it a lot of times on like a chest supported row
Yes.
where they get really, really flat up top and they have like one area where they bend a lot. Usually when you see something like that in a video, whether it's a Dante row or any chest supported row, it usually means that there's an overuse of your rectus abdominis to pull you down rather than getting genuine, authentic rounding through the rib cage. Does that make sense?
Yeah, 100%.
And so kind of the antidote to that is to, quite frankly, unround a little bit and like think about almost inflating from the inside so that you're getting a little bit intentional rounding here.
Oh yeah. That's a
Um, for a wider individual, usually y'all are going to have a harder time getting any sort of rounding in your traps and front delts are going to be so dominant that you almost have to get a little bit lazier with it, if that makes sense.
yeah,
And
that's
like
why I said relax
try less
probably.
hard.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. So that's kind of where my brain was like, okay, so who is that a good cue for, and who might need a little bit of a different strategy. So for someone like me, I need to intentionally think about making sure that I'm kind of inflating from the inside out to provide that stability. For you, because you're so force driven, you actually need to almost let go and let yourself rest on more kind of passive structures, passive tension, things like that.
You 100% just nailed how I do bent over row laterals on a dumbbell, like with dumbbells on a bench. Like I just literally
Well, I've
grab.
seen you do them too, and it's like this is why I get so jazzed about talking about training with you because it's such an awesome freaking marriage of like the nerdy things and also just what has always worked for you, right? Like you're a great representation of why certain concepts have worked and made them work for you. And I wish that all of these like, super nerds who want to operate in a way that doesn't work. I really wish they would be more open to the fact that you're literally in every way living, walking proof of some of these archetypes that are talked about within certain schools of thought.
You know,
Does that make
I
sense?
pray that those individuals get to learn through experience, meaning because most are coaches, right? They'll have to realize really quick that when they aren't producing results for 100% of people, they're going to have to get more flexible and less rigid in their thoughts. And it's like, okay, cool. When I watch this person do that, it doesn't look right. It doesn't look like me, or it doesn't look like this client or that client. And you have to be like, huh, I wonder why that is. Like, again,
Yeah,
it
yeah.
goes back to my curiosity, right? Like, oh, when I have someone do a back squat, why does she want to throw her hips back and not just sit down in the hole? Oh, that's right, because her quads are weak. And she wants to recruit glute hamstring low back, right? Like, or there could be some other structural issues there. I just made that over simplistic of
Yeah,
one.
yeah, yeah.
But, or maybe that's just ingrained in her pattern. Hey, sit back into a squat. Shit on the floor, not on your feet. Like another coaching one, right?
I've never actually heard that one, and that is hilarious.
Oh yeah, yeah, yeah. I think that was a
I've never heard that before. Oh
I
my
think
God.
I think that's a Jim Wendler one.
That is hilarious. That sounds like him, so I could see that. That's hilarious.
When I talk to about a lot of my guys with like, like, hey, like,
That's
anyways,
great.
that's a whole. I don't want to go down that rabbit hole, but like, I really pray that they begin to pay attention to things like that. Why does when you do this exercise it looks like that as opposed to this? Like, and it's not because that person just sucks. Like,
Yeah, 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 yeah.
you know
You
what I
know,
mean?
I sent you a post yesterday of someone who I think sees things similar to how we do and is just a little bit more thoughtful in his words. You and I just sit here and kind of rage, and we're like, "Bruh, can you not be dumb?" Uh,
Yeah, yeah, yes,
but the way he said it was that, like, we do these studies and they're done in their exclusion criteria in these studies for a reason, right?
yes, yes,
And that is to get as filtered down and unidimensional as possible. Now, in the rest of life, those principles may still apply, but we don't have those same exclusion criteria.
yes,
So we don't have that same specificity, and we have to understand that those principles, like they're still going to apply, but they're going to apply differently.
yes, yeah.
And a great example of this, and I would love to hear your take on this. is I want to provide a little bit of context without being like overly contextual.
Yeah.
So, occlusion training,
Yes.
great idea, right? In general,
Yes.
someone doing like a crisp pause on the leg press with occlusion training in prep
Yes.
every week.
I laugh. You know why?
So, I have seen anecdotally, I've seen people drive up their A1C significantly throughout a prep when insulin sensitivity should be improving. And
Yes.
I had a conversation with someone, and I can't for the life of me remember who.
Mm.
Um, but it was kind of like, well, yeah, if you're doing a ton of occlusion training, cortisol is going to be driven up, and you're probably going to have a whole other slew of issues that go on with that. Now, all the research says that, well, occlusion training locally should improve local muscle insulin sensitivity.
Yes.
So, which of those is true? Well, both, right?
Yeah.
I felt like an idiot because it made it sound like I was sitting here saying that occlusion training is going to like elevate A1C and have the opposite effect. And I said, well, no, because like we have research that says these things, but we also know that what are they doing in the research? They're not working with people who have exogenous PEDs. They're not working with people who are in a state that is going to be hyper vigilant, hypercortisol driven. They're not working with people who are taking extreme weight and probably, if we're honest, overly occluding. So they're not going to get the AVO2 difference. They're just getting hypoxia or ischemia. So there are all these other things that we need to look at, right? Um, and it was just such a great example because this is someone I really, really respected. And well, I do still respect a ton, but it was one of those things where I just kind of went, when did we stop learning to think about like, okay, well, we know this is good in the situation, knowing we're an extreme population, when might what we see deviate enough from what a study says? Does that make sense?
One
And am I crazy for thinking that like, no, there's a point at which too much occlusion training, like too much of a good thing. Am I off?
No. Here's yeah. I can't remember if I've said this to you ever. I think I probably have. I say this to a lot of people. More is better unless it's not.
Yeah.
It's as simple as that. It's like, okay, cool. Like that occlusion training can be applied and applied intelligent when applied intelligently, I think can be very beneficial. But at what point, like if you think about a sponge, you can only wring so much water out of it before it's dry. Like, hey,
Yeah.
we got all we could out of it and let's move on. Like, yeah. Which is it goes back to like why within a training session that you do with me, you may do a top set and a back off, you may do a rest pause, you may do a superset, we may finish with a giant set, and then we may finish with a weighted stretch. Well, Chris, which one of those do you believe in? Which one created the most growth? All of it, homie.
Yeah. Yeah.
You know,
I
it
guess I
doesn't.
was more curious, like, if you've seen anything, because I know you really like occlusion training, where's your limit on like, okay, that's probably too much, and what are you thinking about in terms of like the potential downside? To
Oh,
me, I'm like it's an overly glycolytic environment, and if we expose someone to that when the context of their system is already like super, super stressed, there's got to be a different interaction.
agreed. Okay, so occluding training. If you look back, the most of that I did was a 12-week program we have called Honey Badger, and we did occlusion training pretty much weekly for arms and then either quads or hamstrings. Um, but that was only one exercise or two. It was never like the whole session. And it was more straight volume. So how we had done that was you take an extremely submaximal load, so probably 40% of a 10 rep max.
Which is pretty much what a lot of the literature is using.
Correct.
They're
And
not using like,
heavy load, right? Because you can't listen. I've done heavyweight with occluded work and a newbie attached, and I don't think most people are going to do that.
maybe
The All right.
I mean, like, let's be honest, like heavy load plus occlusion heart is tough. And then we add on the newbie and they're like, that's a big jump.
Yeah, that's yeah. I'm just gonna just blaze by that. That's a whole other episode. Um, so then we would do that with like let's say bicep curls, and we would do 4 or 5 sets to failure with 30-second rest periods, and then we would take the reps off. And that was the last exercise of biceps for the day. Then we go into triceps, do all your tricep shit, and then we would do occluded, like say rope push downs for the same like rotation, 40-ish% of a 10 rep max, 4 to 5 sets, depending upon the day, and then failure for 30-second rest periods. And I never found that to be too demanding. We would do that with like legs too. So we would do it with either leg curls or leg extensions. And for that program, we just stuck with those two exercises. Then John and I began to tinker with like we were working with Dr. Mario Novo, who if you like occlusion work, like please go study with.
Yeah, he's the guy.
Yeah. I've got the opportunity to spend multiple weekends with him, once at Swiss, once with John. It was incredible. We wrote a lot of manuals together for the Mountain Dog website between the three of us. Anyways, again, another side tangent. He is like what I would consider like the BFR like goat.
He's the
And
dude.
we he got us into doing it was a tricep to finish legs. So if you go leg curls, leg extensions, body weight lunges. And then you would do a 30-second rest period, and you repeat that. And I can tell you this, like I did not want to do that back to back weeks.
Yeah,
I just didn't.
I'm with you. And like, I think the differentiating factor here is that like the way that y'all applied it are the way that all the studies have basically applied it,
Yes.
with the exception of like when you do the tricep.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah.
Um, and I think the mistake that a lot of people are making is like occluded. So just for context, it was an occluded crisp pause on the leg press.
Yeah.
That's kind of where I'm like, okay, there's a different threshold there.
Oh yeah. There is.
And
Yeah.
it's, and I think again, it's like we've got good literature about, things that are isolation-based movements, or or like a low load compound, like a body weight squat or goblet squat. That's an entirely different stimulus. Not only on the muscle, but I would also say like on the cardiovascular system in terms of being able to deliver to that. Um, and I guess it just kind of got me thinking, like, and maybe this is another episode that we film, like, where and what is the threshold at which beyond that, something like occlusion work may actually drive negative adaptations.
Yeah. Because
And I don't know, like, I think some of that is going to have a lot to do with someone's CO2 tolerance,
yeah.
because that's going to set the baseline for, well, can we even deliver what's needed to allow the muscle to continue working arterially rather than just having the venous occlusion. Um,
I will say this. My thought process on occlusion training is I like it more sprinkled in through the course of the months now, as opposed to weekly. And I'll give you a perfect example. When little Dave came in the first time when we trained legs, we did a BFR set of leg press that John and I did years ago. So it was you work up to 8 plates aside on a leg press, then you wrap your legs, and then you just trade sets going 8 plates, 7 plates, 6 plates, five, four, and three. And then as you pull plates, you increase the number of reps. So like set one with 8 plates was 8 reps, and then he would go. So the rest period is when your partner goes, and then you just both pull a plate and you get back in the sled and
yeah.
7 for 10, 6 for 12, 5 for 15, 4 for 20, and then 3 for 30. That's what we
How much else did you do that day?
well, we did a top set and back off to the death on hack squats, and then we went in the back of elite and we did 52 step chain lunges supersetted with backward sled drags, and he was violently puking in the parking lot.
I bet.
I don't recommend that to most people. It's on my YouTube. It's really a fun watch. But so that was part of a session that John and I tinkered around with where we did that. And then him and I went and did 1.5s on hack squat after. And then we were trading sets of dumbbell walking lunges where while he was doing his lunges, I was laying on the ground with my feet propped up on a 3 foot box, to occlude the blood from my legs. And then we would switch. So then I would lunge, he would rest on the ground, and then we would switch. We did 3 rounds of that. That feels really that session to this day is one of my favorite leg days of all time. Like I have it fully written out. Um, I'll have to send it to you one day if you want to try it. It's really fun. But that is
Uh,
that is a standalone leg day. That is not something I would repeat weekly.
right, right. Well, I think something that we could talk about at the future too would be like, we always, I think, are encouraging people to like stop worrying so much about fatigue.
Yeah.
Like you're gonna be fine. But there's context for that too. And so we could probably even spend a session talking through like, like I've run myself so far into a wall with training before, and you have too, that you have no other option. And to spend, having to spend months digging out from that sucks.
Yeah.
Never want anyone to have to do that.
Agreed.
And I think we're going to see the landscape kind of change to where people are either going to be so afraid of fatigue or they're going to be like us, where they actually do fall off that cliff and trying to figure out how to get out of that hole is, God, man, if you don't have someone walking with you through that, that is not a fun place to be. Because mentally, you don't want to train, your CNS is burned out, you're sluggish the rest of the day, you don't feel like yourself, all your neurotransmitters are jacked up, like, not a good time.
I think that's how we end it. Like what you just spoke on, like, that to me is maturing mentally in the gym, where you can walk away from a session knowing everything you did was adequate to grow,
Hmm.
not beating yourself into the ground to the point where it's unrecoverable, right? Like that is the biggest part. And just like we talked about with the Dante row, like again, maturing in your training is knowing that is a simple piece of the puzzle, not the entire puzzle. So
Yeah. Let's talk about that next time,
yeah,
because I think that'd be a really good one.
yeah, agreed. Agreed. Because listen, I was guilty of early in my bodybuilding. Like I talked about Chris Aceto, right? Like I remember him, like, there's a video of him talking to Jay, and Jay's like, "What back exercise should I do?" And he goes, "All of them." He's like, "No, which ones?" He's like, "Literally, do every back exercise." And I'm like, "Yes, sir.
Okay.
Got it. Done. Sign me the fuck up." So yes, next time we will talk about when to walk away and when to feel good about it. And I have plenty of examples of when I've done that with people in person and personally. So until next time, Chris, Danny, we are done for another episode.